So the Biden administration just told the Supreme Court to protect the ATF's ban on bump stocks. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think the ATF needs to be abolished, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I also want to give a shout out to one of the main supporters of the channel, which is Savior Equipment. Savior Equipment has some of my favorite range bags out on the market. Every time I go to the range, I take their dual rifle bag and some of their other bags as well. So some of my favorite range bags, if you guys are interested, go check them out. And thank you again, Savior Equipment, for supporting this channel. Also, I want to let you know that this content is powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. So head on over to joinfpc.org to help support the Second Amendment cause. Thank you again, Firearms Policy Coalition, for supporting this channel. So like I said in the intro, the Biden administration just filed a response in the Apashian v. Garland case, which is seeking review from the Supreme Court. This case is a challenge to the ATF's interpretation of bump stocks as machine guns and therefore essentially banning them. Now, some quick background on how this all happened and how this case ended up before the Supreme Court. For many years, the ATF had correctly concluded that the NFA and the GCA's definition of the term machine gun does not include devices like bump stocks. However, after the tragic events in Las Vegas, the ATF, after being directed and ordered by President Trump, decided to arbitrarily change the regulatory definition of machine gun so that bump stocks would be considered to actually be machine guns. This new rule took effect in March of 2019, and therefore under federal law, owners were required to either destroy the devices or to surrender them to the ATF. This change in definition made possessors of bump stocks potentially subject to 10 years in prison and or a $250,000 fine if they failed to destroy or surrender those devices. After the ATF changed their interpretation, he filed this lawsuit against them, which has now made its way up to the Supreme Court. In response to his cert petition to the Supreme Court, the Biden administration has filed their brief and is arguing that the ATF has appropriately interpreted the term machine gun to encompass devices like bump stocks. So let's take a look at the brief and see what the Biden administration is actually arguing. To start off, they provide the question they believe the Supreme Court should consider, and that is whether the Court of Appeals correctly determined that this district court did not abuse its discretion in denying petitioners' request for a preliminary injunction in this challenge to a final rule interpreting the term machine gun to encompass devices known as bump stocks, which permit users to fire a semi-automatic rifle continuously with a single pull of the trigger. So that is the question that they want the Supreme Court to actually consider if the Supreme Court takes up this case. The three main arguments the Biden administration makes in their petition is that the petitioners have failed to show a likelihood of success, that there is no division of authority warranting the Supreme Court's review in this case, and that the question of Chevron deference does not need review. Now, I'm going to cover all those and we're going to actually clarify what exactly they're arguing. The first argument made by the Biden administration was that the petitioners here were not likely to succeed on the merits of the case. This goes to the fact that in the lower court, the petitioners sought a preliminary injunction. A preliminary injunction essentially puts a hold on the enforcement of the agency's actions, here the ATF's enforcement against bump stocks, during the actual trial period. So that was denied by the lower courts. Two of the main elements for a court to grant a preliminary injunction or to deny it is that the person must suffer irreparable harm, but for the injunction being granted by the court. And the other one is proving that they are likely going to succeed on the merits of the case. Now here in their brief, the Biden administration argues that the ATF's final rule correctly interprets the component terms of the statutory definition of machine gun, correctly applies those interpretations to conclude that bump stocks are machine guns, and persuasively explains that ATF's prior classification of those devices as non-machine guns was erroneous. The district court was therefore correct in concluding that the final rule reflects the best interpretation of the terms automatically and single function of the trigger, and that the petitioner is not likely to succeed in challenging the rule as inconsistent with the statute. So they're saying the lower court found all these things, and therefore the petitioners here are not likely to succeed on the merits, and therefore you should kick this case. Now, the second main argument that the Biden administration made in their brief is that there is no circuit division that warrants a Supreme Court review here on this issue. The Supreme Court often will take up cases when there is a split among states or lower courts on how the law should actually be treated or interpreted. Here, the Biden administration says there is no split, so the Supreme Court should essentially not review this issue. They state petitioner does not identify any conflict of authority within the courts of appeals that would warrant this court review at this present time. In this section, they discuss various other circuit court cases that have reviewed this issue and are currently being reviewed, like the GOA bump stock case. They hide behind the fact that that case, the GOA case, although there was a panel decision by the Sixth Circuit which was in favor of GOA, they argue, well, that case has gone en banc, so that's not relevant. Also, the Biden administration says that the Supreme Court should ignore a recent military court ruling which found that bump stocks do not meet the definition of a machine gun. So they say they should ignore that one because that is not binding on any other court outside of the military. And also they say that the Sixth Circuit GOA case should be ignored as well. And they are using all those examples to say that there is no controversy between lower courts and that this case is essentially not ripe for Supreme Court review because there is no split. In the final section of arguments, the Biden administration argues that this case does not need to be reviewed under Chevron deference, or they also say that they should ignore rule of lenity. Now let me explain real quick Chevron deference and rule of lenity to give you guys a little bit more understanding of what they are arguing. Chevron deference is a term coined after a landmark Supreme Court case, referring to the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions. Generally, for an agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute must be rational or reasonable. So when a statute has an ambiguous term, the agency responsible for enforcing that statute may be able to determine what the term was intended to mean as long as their interpretation is rational and reasonable. In contrast to Chevron deference, the rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to the people, not the enforcement agency. The interpretation of the definition of machine gun does involve criminal penalties, and therefore the rule of lenity would direct courts to interpret it in a favor of the people, to us, the public at large, not the ATF, because there are criminal penalties attached to someone being in illegal possession of a so-called machine gun. Now, Chevron deference is used only if a term is ambiguous. However, the Biden administration is saying that you don't use Chevron deference here because in their view, the term machine gun in the GCA and the NFA is clear. There is no ambiguity in that term. But in that context, they're saying it's clear, and it's clearly including bump stocks as a machine gun. So that is their viewpoint. However, that statement cuts against the ATF's own prior actions and decisions and actually deeming that bump stocks are not included in that definition. Now, I'm of the position that Chevron deference isn't actually even the analysis that should be used. Instead, the rule of lenity should apply because, again, these statutes, the GCA and the NFA, have criminal penalty implications, heavy criminal penalty implications. There's also some fines, but essentially if you are in illegal possession of a so-called machine gun, the ATF can put you in jail for a really long time. And because criminal implications are attached to those statutes, the rule of lenity said that the court should rule in our favor, be more lenient towards the people, rather than give discretion to the ATF. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Algore's rhythm. It adds fuel to his jet and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos in this type of two-way news. So thank you so much to everybody who's liked, commented, subscribed, who's hit the notification bell. You guys are directly impacting these videos and helping these videos to reach more people. Especially thank you to everybody who's subscribed recently. You guys have helped me reach my 200,000 subscriber goal. I wanted to achieve that by the end of the year and you guys helped me crush that. So we are now marching towards 300,000 subscribers. So if you guys are kind of a lurker, if you've been watching the channel for a while and you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And also if you're a new subscriber, go ahead and comment down below that you're a new subscriber and I will make sure I comment back to you. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this is Built by Armed Scholars and Station we maintain by Armed Scholars.